Now on to my favorite part, the month in review. So, for those of you who are new to my stream, basically this is the part at the end of every month, whenever I get done with the last game of my month, which is on the last Thursday of every month, I will just go through and take, let me just back up a minute here, because, wow, my brain's all over the place, and I apologize for that. Basically what it is after I play each game, I'll take a few moments to meditate on the game itself and just digest it, because usually, like, the adrenaline or the good feels are still going, and I sit down and I try to look at it a little bit objectively. So I'll, like, review some of my VODs, some of my YouTube videos from the games in past, and I'll take some more in-depth notes and some more in-depth feedback, so that way I can give the devs something more objective and a lot more, as I said, in-depth to work with. So moving right along from front to back, first game of the month was Rise of the Rune Lords. For this game, the pros of it is that it has amazing improvements to lighting since its previous versions. Tone and atmosphere makes for a great horror hybrid adventure feel. The new row mechanics that have been introduced in the new build really make that Necromancer fight feel completely different. I like that there's even a stealth mission in the first leg of the second chapter. That was probably my favorite part of that game. As much as it has my ire and it creeps me out, and as much as I hate horror games, I really, really liked sneaking around the sanitarium, and I thought that was great. And as always, characterization, even in the new NPCs like the Sanatorium Master, or Headmaster, Warden, whatever you want to call him, as well as the Necromancer that was introduced, Grace Civilis, all the different characters of the town. Each character definitely has their own voice, their own lexicon, their own use of language. It's really easy to get into each character's head and find out what kind of person that they are right off the bat. Again, lore and story in the game is great. There's a great world-building mechanic to it. It definitely shows that there's a world out there outside of where you are right now. Rise of the Rune Lords as a game continues to have a very gritty, high fantasy feel. It definitely feels a lot like D&D, but it definitely takes both kind of like the grittiness of Dragon Age and the high fantasy of something like Final Fantasy IV. And combines the two together, and it feels really good. As far as another thing that I like, the balance philosophy in it is extremely clear. It definitely favors the player and the player having fun from battle to battle. In this leg of the adventure, though, at least in the first part of Chapter 2, there aren't a whole lot of battles. I mean, there's random battles from when you go to Sandpoint down to the barn, or Sandpoint down to the sanatorium, but yeah, there's just really not a whole lot. But it does work within the feel that I can definitely tell that Will is trying to go for there. Because, yeah, sneaking around a sanatorium, obviously you're not going to have a bunch of random encounters on top of trying to dodge a bunch of tiefling guards up in a sanatorium. And also when you're investigating, it'd be kind of weird to have, it'd be offbeat to have a bunch of random encounters while you're trying to do investigating in town. But overall, Rise of the Rune Lords is a very solidly constructed game. And the detractors that are just in that 2-hour section of it definitely play into its strengths. How I would describe Rise of the Rune Lords in a term is a visual novel. It definitely feels like participating in a book, in a novel, in a story. So, all in all, Will, you're on the right track. I definitely like what you're doing with the game. Definitely keep it up, and I look forward to playing it more. Next game up, Wooden Ocean. Things I definitely like about it are definitely the unique tile set and unique assets that are used in the game. It's very dark and atmospheric, like I've said before. It definitely has like a late 80s PC game feel to it, which you just don't find anywhere else. The battle system is really unique, even amongst Dragon Warrior style battle systems. It's very easy, very intuitive to use. A lot of the music is really good and really atmospheric. map layouts, especially in the Wooden Ocean itself, and in a lot of that underground part of the town, definitely encourages a lot of exploration, which I like. Trash mobs are definitely highly engaging and have fast turnover. I definitely like the trash mob philosophy in that. Balanced philosophy as far as, players versus enemies, it definitely, in most circumstances, at least on normal difficulty, definitely does favor the player. A lot of the cons to it. Let's see here. Almost all the characters feel completely unrelatable. It kind of feels like there's an overload of dialogue. Dialogue could have ended 6 lines earlier in most cases. There's a world map, but there's not a lot of world building. There's not a lot really telling you what's going on outside of the Wooden Ocean and outside of the main town. And it really doesn't engage you to get out and explore or want to learn more about the world. I noticed that also it seems to have aspects of Victorian gaslighting, but also has fantasy aspects. It definitely has an undiscernible genre that I'm still trying to feel out and get a feel for and really understand. Because that just kind of occurred to me the last time I played through. Might sound like a little bit of a nitpick, but it's there's some weird aspects that just kind of are all thrown together here. Overall, though, Wooden Ocean as a game has a fun battle system. It has great graphics. Just the story is a little bit difficult to follow. In a term, I would say that this game still feels like it has to it feels like it has to realize itself. It's not quite decided on what it is. But also, I'm probably not far enough into the story to really know. But definitely, Murda, if you're out there watching this, I would definitely like to see where things go, or at least learn what this world and what this game and what this story is about a little bit better. Next game up, Even for Eternia. The best thing I can say about this game is it's definitely charming. It's a very pretty game. I definitely like that it has a crafting system. The crafting system is very intuitive, very easy to use. It doesn't have an overworld map per se, and instead has Legend of Mana interlinking maps that make up a world map and it actually is pretty difficult to get lost between them. And I actually do like the map layouts, both in towns and in the wilderness between towns. It's very open, and it's linear, but it's open enough to encourage exploration, which is really awesome. Excuse me. The game really has a Mystic Quest and Secret of Mana feel to it. If you were to mash up the best qualities of things from Mystic Quest and the best qualities of things from Secret of Mana, that's probably how I would describe the aesthetic of this game. Characterization in this game is really good. I love how simple the characters are. It has a female Shujinko lead, and I absolutely love it. And then the deuteragonist, the secondary hero, Wolf. What was his name? Wolf. I love that he's just the adult in the room. He's just so serious all the time. I definitely like the amount of world building that goes on, especially in the first 2 hours of the game. It tells you so much about the outside world. There's also a lot of just good lore tidbits all the way throughout, just dropped here and there. You can definitely tell these characters, are familiar with the world that they're in. Even for Eternia has a very simplistic battle system. Battle balance definitely leans on player favoring over enemy playering. And as far as the aesthetic of the game, it's 4-color high fantasy over some very dark and potentially horrific overtones, which I think is done really, really well. The only nitpicks I really have about it is that the battle in the upper right corner seems a little bit jarring, but you do get to tune it out after a couple of battles. The subscreen feels a little bit difficult to navigate, but you do eventually get used to it. Let's see here. One thing that I was wondering, more of amusing than a complaint. I noticed that a lot of the enemies on the world map were represented by flames. And what I thought at first is, I'm like, okay, this feels kind of like a placeholder. But then as I thought about it, I'm like, wait a second. The more battles you do, the more chance you have of encountering a wraith. And I'm like, hey, wait, what if those flames are actually there to obscure the fact that you could run into a wraith after a certain amount of time? So while that does feel more placeholder, I can definitely see its use. Overall, though, the game is very simplistic and easygoing. Really easy to dive into, really easy to play. And if I had to describe it, even for Eternia, in a single term, I would describe it as charming. It is just a really charming game. I don't know how to describe it really any other way. Moving right along to the next game in the list is The Lost. Definitely I like the characterization in it. Every character definitely has their own personality and voice, and it's very loud and very... Well, I shouldn't say loud. Every character is forthright with who they are. There's a lot of world building, especially straight out the gate. Tells you about, a whole world of things out there. I like the, interface is really, really easy to navigate. A lot of the art assets are really good. It definitely has some really unique music. Kind of reminds me of Skyrim in a lot of ways. Lost's aesthetic that it goes for is definitely a Conan gritty feel. I can definitely feel that through the game. Another thing is that it has an incredibly complex battle system. And it does have those 4 rows. It does have attacker, defender, magic, and item. For the most part, it does feel like there are a sufficient amount of items for row 4 to use. One thing I am interested to find out to that effect is how gold scaling affects how gold scaling comes into the game, and if expendables are cheap and easy to come across, that way when you have a character in row 4, they are very easy to utilize and don't feel like they're just like, well, I can attack. Another thing is that it definitely has a really high strategy aesthetic to it. It's very difficult, but it is rewarding when you get it. And then let's see here, a couple of nitpicks about it. A couple of things that just don't sit right with me. Is that the interface, at least in the subscreen, feels overly simplistic and definitely feels like it could use a little bit more love or flavor. Just kind of like the sandiness it just feels kind of like sandy and bland, but it feels like it could use something a little bit more. Another thing is I wasn't a huge fan of the invisible walls or open map layout in the first part of the intro. I think what would work better is closing it off in some way or incentivizing the player to have a path to follow. That way they know where to go. While I believe that open map layouts work out great for MMOs and D&D, they don't really work out so well for RPGs, and invisible walls just kind of feels like a cheap way of closing in the map and not being able to explore the vast openness that it is. Another thing is that the balance philosophy between does this game favor the players or does it favor the enemies just isn't clear. It's pretty inconsistent battle to battle. And the battle system feels kind of gamey and overkill at times, but other times it feels completely necessary to victory, even against trash mobs. So I definitely think that one thing that The Lost could benefit from is a more clear-cut and concise battle balance philosophy. Because, like I said, sometimes it feels like it overly favors the player, and the other time it feels like it overly flavors the enemy, and there's not really any consistency to it one way or the other. Another thing, I'm definitely not a fan of the TP cheesing, as I call it, which is just, use one of those potions that give you TP, and just utilizing it against bosses. It kind of feels like that's the one and only use for it. And I'm really kind of unclear if it's truly intended to be necessary in order to trivialize boss battle encounters for lack of any other viable strategy as far as scrapping it out with the boss. I guess my question there is using is using a full TP bar and comboing bosses down meant to be the way to fight bosses? Are bosses not meant to be scrapped out against through other strategic means? And yeah, it's definitely a thinking man's battle system. It is definitely a stressful battle system to navigate, especially against boss level encounters. It does require a lot of forethought and planning and a lot of quick learned, deep understanding of the system itself. And like I said, you have to learn very quickly, and you have to be able to learn what options are available and how to apply those options and understand how they play out down the line in conjunction with all the different cooldowns and just everything else going on. A lot of the battle subsystems just feel kind of clunky and asynergistic. What I mean by that is that they don't really seem to work well with one another. They don't seem to work intuitively with one another. It's that it just feels like bros are one thing, TPing is another, utilizing items is another, and what was the other thing? Yeah, using skills is a completely different thing. Probably the best I can explain it is that if there was a way to run these together without them each feeling like their own separate thing, I feel like that this game could have a whole lot going for it. And what was I thinking? Oh crap! I just lost my thought. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, I feel like a lot of those battle subsystems could work more intuitively, more synergistically with each other, rather than each subsystem of the battle system feeling like its own separate thing. In a term, I would probably describe The Lost as difficult. The game is just straight up difficult. And sounds like, hey, that's it's definitely a hardcore gamer's game. I probably wouldn't recommend it to, a casual or an upstart, just somebody looking to have fun, but probably something more to someone who's willing to push the limits of their systemic knowledge of a video game. But with that out of the way, next thing's next, Book of Shadows. Oh my god, I love this game so much. I am so going to be adding it to my lineup moving forward, just as long as slots stay open. Book of Shadows, things that I love about it. It has really, really good art direction. Everything is simple but effective. It definitely has a really strong Final Fantasy IV and Mystic Quest feel. I love the world building in this game because it's such an insane mishmash of such an insane mishmash of a fantasy world. It's so unique. I've never seen anything like it. And the best part of it is that the entire game builds on and hypes its own suspension of disbelief without ever breaking it. It makes itself so easy to follow. Like, the characters live in this insane world, and they're like, yeah, things just happen like this every day. I like that that every single aspect of the interface is extremely simple. Gameplay starts very simple, straight out the gate, stays simple through the first dungeon. Battle philosophy way favors the player to the point that resources are just... they feel unlimited, especially in the first dungeon. I can definitely see where the developer just wants players to have fun with the game and the story, and doesn't want to, bog you down with combat. Combat feels kind of ceremonial, and I wish I could say that as a nitpick, but it definitely works for the game's aesthetic itself. Trash mob philosophy in that regard. It's mindless, it's fast turnover, and you can just battle for days. Like I said before, the world building style is completely unique too. It's told completely through comedy and dialogue between characters, and all the storytelling comes from comedy, and I'm a sucker for it. Characterization is really good. Each character, once again, speaks with their own voice. They are forthright in who they are. It's really easy to tell personalities and characters where they come from. I love Cedric because he's a total Shujinko, and I love Leala because she is a total cinnamon roll, and I just want to hug her. The only real nitpicks I can really say is that there's not many. I mean, the tutorial does feel kind of over-explained, but they're optional. You can actually skip the tutorials. The battle system is incredibly intuitive outside of that. And the only other nitpick is I feel like some improved or updated lighting effects could really do a lot to improve the atmosphere. But if it's really going for that old school SNES feel, it sticks to that vision really well. Overall, I'd say it's a very strong game with very few detractors. And if I had to describe it in a term, I would say Book of Shadows is a game that loves fun. It is just such a fun, loving, comedic, witty game. And I definitely can't recommend it enough. And then moving right along, Manor Raiders. Oh my god, this one has I have lots of notes on this one. What I like is that it has a very clean and very polished interface. I love a lot of the color scheme and art in the interface itself. Everything is really easy to read and understand as far as, skill and item descriptions. The dungeon design is slightly linear, but it's intuitive and it does reward exploration. You do have Fifi, who tells you where hidden treasure chests are, so that you're not missing anything. I also really like, because I'm not the biggest fan of patrolling encounters. I'm actually a bigger fan of random encounters personally, but I really like that this game has a good mix of both patrolling and random encounters. One thing I absolutely love about this game is its unique trash mob philosophy. When done right, it completely favors the player, and you can just fight for days without expenditure of any resources. And when you get it right, it's just some, when you get, what was I thinking? Oh yeah. And when you get it wrong, when you don't have it right, the trash mob philosophy completely favors the opponent, and the entire game really does stay very consistent to that. And every battle is different. Every battle definitely is categorized differently, and it's very clear. Trash mobs are definitely pushovers, and then there's some fights like against human opponents that do require some care, and then there's other trash mob fights like the giants in the mana cave that do require a serious level of care. But again, all this game does is just ask you to master the basics. It's just like Dark Souls, and I love it. I would say a lot of the complaints that I have with this are like the dialogue does feel a little bit unwieldy, and the overall lexicon just needs to be made a little bit more consistent. Like I said, it's a little more modern feeling in the beginning, but a little bit more poetic and medieval feeling after the first room. But other than that, yeah, things are good. It could use some improvements as far as world building and characterization, but I understand that the game starts in a dungeon, and there's not really a whole lot you can do with that. Let's see here. Yeah, nothing else really as far as nitpicks go. But what does everybody talk about when it comes to Manor Raiders? The battle system. And I'm actually going to break this out into its own category outside of pros and cons, just to give all my thoughts on it. The battle system is extremely complex. It has some incredibly synergistic subsystems. Like, the whole thing works well together. On a basic level, it's well explained and it's easy to grasp. On an advanced level, I feel like there could be some improvements to it as far as explaining it and learning it. You really only get 2 rounds in one encounter to pick up on basically all the advanced techniques of the game. Having talked with the dev, he does understand this, that could be made more clear. But definitely, I feel like the game needs more space, or like, I guess you could say, like a quiet space, or like a training mode, to where players could learn the more advanced techniques and learn to master them on their own, and then go out and practice it in the world. Sort of like training mode in Valkyrie Profile. The battle system definitely takes a lot of practice to master, and it's so satisfying when you understand it. I feel like a lot of the visual cues, as far as the active press or live reaction system of the game goes, I feel like those could be improved on. Like, windows could be widened by a few frames, or there could be another visual or audio cue as far as when to attack, when to do things. For the most part, I know what there are there, but I feel like it could use more. One thing I have noticed in the game is that action economy is everything. And most of the action economy in the game comes from counterattacking. When using healing items in battle requires use of that action economy. It completely takes a character's action economy out of the picture. However, with what's her name? I'm totally losing it. I didn't write it down. My apologies. The Scarlet Mage. I noticed that she does have a subsystem, or at least an advanced technique, to where she can heal the party following a series of counterattacks. I believe that it could really, really, really benefit the player to learn how to do that consistently. Because right now it just feels kind of inconsistent and up to RNG. But I know, that there's something that I'm missing there. All in all, I actually enjoy Manor Raiders a lot, and I think it has a lot of potential to be both engaging and exciting. I definitely like it. If I had to describe Manor Raiders in a single term, I would describe it as potential. It has a lot of potential to be such a good game. And I really hope that the developer keeps on with that, because he has so much on it. He has so much good going in that game, and I love it, and I want to see it grow. Oh man. So off that soapbox, and on to another one. Radiant Arc. This game I love too. The thing I love most about Radiant Arc is the art direction on all levels is just so good. Everything is simple. It's childlike. It's carefree. It's 4-color. It's high fantasy. It's such a lovable and endearing environment. I love a lot of the title screen, the sub-screen art, the boss art, the mapping, the lighting, the atmosphere, the particle effects, the day and night cycle. Everything about Radiant Arc feels very polished and very clean and very perfected. Maps are big but mostly linear, but like good map design, they do reward exploration. I love the sound design in this game. Wingless Seraph is one of my favorite composers out there. Any game that has that gets instant points from me. I'm not going to say it's a detractor if it doesn't, but I will just say I love the soundtrack to this game. I also love the sound design as far as battle effects and sound effects even out in the overworld map, like just when you're having conversations and there's scripted events. Yeah, Linky put this game together really, really, really well. From both an art and sound design perspective, in my opinion. I definitely like the unique feel of the rotary battle menu. I'm a huge fan of pinata enemies. Like, enemies, when they die, they actually drop things on screen. It's like, oh, I got something out of that battle. All the dialogue flows easily and naturally, and I love everything about it. It's so... I barely ever trip over my words when voicing that game. It has really good characterization. Every character has their own personality and their own quirks. I really also like the unique clock and day and night tracking aspect. And then, let's see... Oh, Trash Mob philosophy. I love the Trash Mob philosophy. It's mindless, but it's engaging, and it has quick turnover, and it's actually really easy to get back to recovery points with minimal fuss. That being said, what I can tell is that the battle balance philosophy is definitely in the favor of the player, especially in the fact that there's no penalty for death. And, again, getting back to recovery points is really, really easy. I can definitely see where the developer... values the player's fun and doesn't want them to be too severely punished for not performing well. which is definitely something that's admirable, and you don't see that out there very often. I really like the fact that, like, there's a lot of games out there that have a quest log in it. This one is absolutely required to have a quest log, because you would just get lost with side distractions if it wasn't for that quest log. It's like, wait, what was I actually supposed to be doing after I got done with these million side things? And I just love it. And just the game is lighthearted and doesn't take itself that seriously in story or in mechanics. My nitpicks to it are few, but I feel like there's just not a whole lot of world building in the beginning. Like, we just don't know a lot about the outside world. There's not a lot that's shown or talked about. Terrence as a character in the first 2 hours feels kind of flat, both personality-wise and mechanic-wise. But even though he's flat mechanically, man, can you build him to survive. The battle menu is definitely a little bit awkward on a controller. Up and down on the D-pad actually operates the menu, not left and right. So if you go back and look at my VODs, you'll see me like seeming like I seem a little bit lost in the menu. Yeah, even in the first 2 hours, I wasn't able to quite get around that. The other thing is overworld lag. I'm not sure what causes lag in the overworld map. It could just really be my i5 dying. Who knows? I feel like another thing that could really help is that when accessing the save menu, like looking at the different save states, I think it'd be really helpful if it listed saved location, so that way you didn't get lost on where you are and weren't totally reliant on, oh, I'm this far into the game. A lot of the save crystals act as healing items and save points. I feel like they can feel abusive to a more serious player, but since the game's geared towards casual and just fun, lighthearted play, I'd say that's more of just like I really had to dig for this nitpick, you know. Another thing is I'm never quite a fan of games that use limited ammo, but at least in Radiant Arc, the limited ammo is balanced out by ammo is everywhere. It's cheap and easy to come across. It's really easy to keep topped off on it. Overall, Radiant Arc is a really strong game with some really weak and flimsy detractors that are compensated by strengths that it has elsewhere in the game. And if I had to describe Radiant Arc in a term, I would say it's delightful. It is a really good game. I really would recommend it to just about anybody. But other than that, it's been a great month. Next month, March schedule is already up. All that information is below. Also, something I do want to put out is I noticed that a lot of people out there in the community are starting to do game jams again. I just want to let you know that I am currently having April slots open to do my own game jam, and for people to submit those. And just all month of April, I'm just going to try and cram as many game jams as I can. But hey, thank you guys all for coming out. It's been a great month of March. Thank you once again to my patrons, and just, yeah, please, definitely subscribe to my Patreon below. Every little bit helps, and I thank all of you guys a bunch. But other than that, again, thank you guys for coming out. Have a great night. Practice proper self-care. Stay hydrated, and I will catch you on the next stream.